Just give us a second. Right. Okay. So today, what the essay that we're going to discuss today is the 10th essay of the Spectator. We've already taken a look at the first essay, which describes the character of the Spectator, the persona of the Spectator, as it were. And the second essay of the Spectator as well, with members of the Spectator Club. I've also made the point that the Spectator Club is a representation of a particular cross section of society, the upper middle class and the upper class of society, and represents also the various kinds of professions that we have. But it does not represent, for example, the lower class of society, as it were, although in several essays we have brief glimpses into their lives. The second fact that we've said is that this is an idealized version of these characters. They're both real and utopian at the same time. And the bonhomie or the camaraderie that exists, the harmony that exists between the different characters, is something that Addison is seeking to project in a very fractured world. Now, it is with that, therefore, that we come to essay number 10, which is a kind of a manifesto for the Spectator papers. What does the Spectator papers want to do, and who are its target audience, is what essay number 10 will seek to discuss. And for that, let me now go on to project the text of the Spectator papers, essay number 10. Now, you will also remember that Addison is, as I pointed out, sort of trying to arrive at what has been described as middle style, where, you know, he's cutting out the Latinate things, he's cutting out very serious prose, and trying to mix, you know, seriousness with humor and levity. He's also trying, in a certain way, to bring in a more conversational tone. At the same time, the Spectator papers, must notice, is not using the discourse of news, as it were. It is using a more literary style, and it's also sort of anchoring itself into the classics, in the sense it is, every essay has a kind of a opening quotation from a classical source. Therefore, the Spectator papers is appealing to a vast readership. It is talking about a kind of a seriousness that is about it is just give me a moment, please. He's talking about a seriousness that has a literary angle to it, but at the same time it is also trying to generate a style which is more accessible to the common people at large, right? So this is what the Spectator papers is setting out to do. I'll now project the Spectator, the first, the essay number 10, and this is where you see Addison beginning with a quotation from Virgil, and the quotation from Virgil fundamentally is translated as, I've observed that seats stored away for a long time, however thoroughly they are looked after, still deteriorate until the greatest possible human effort is used. In the same way, all things go to the bad, lose their power, and slip backwards. It's exactly like when a sculler is trying his utmost to propel his boat up a river with his oars. If he happens to relax his arms for a moment, the current sweeps him away, headlong stream. So Addison is using the last part of that dictum, as it were. So there's a suggestion that if you continuously do not sharpen your mind, or if you continuously do not engage mind, then the mind will degenerate, right? And it will be taken away with with pleasure, and only whiling away your time. So the mind has to be productively engaged, is what Addison is trying to suggest. And then he goes on to say, it is with much satisfaction that I hear this great city, the great city obviously referring to London, inquiring day by day after these my papers. So already within the 10th issue of the Spectator papers, Addison is claiming that the Spectator papers has generated a lot of interest and popularity, and receiving my morning lectures with a becoming seriousness and attention. So Addison never suggests that his essays are purely for pleasure. He's always making the suggestion that the Spectator papers are serious discourses which demand the attention of his readers. My publisher tells me that there are already 3,000 of them distributed every day. So this is the number of the Spectator papers, 3,000 of them distributed every day. So he's printing 3,000 Spectator papers every day, which is, given the kind of readership that you had, quite a significant amount. So that if I allow 20 readers to every paper, which I look upon as a modest competition, I may reckon about 300,000 disciples in London and Westminster, who I hope will take care to distinguish themselves from the thoughtless herd of their ignorant and unattentive brethren. So you see, what Addison is suggesting is that reading the Spectator gives them a dose of common sense and learning, sharpens their mind, and therefore distinguishes them from the common mass of humanity. That is to say that the Spectator carries a burden of, you can say, sharpening and making fine the audience. So their minds are, as it were, sharpened. Since I've raised to myself to so great an audience, I shall spare no pains to make them their instructions agreeable and their diversion useful. So now comes the Horatian dictum that Addison is going to lay down, for which reason I shall endeavor to enliven morality with wit. Now remember, this is the quotation to go to. Memorize this quotation. This is something which I'll be sort of talking about ad nauseum, over and over again. So endeavor to enliven morality with wit. So I'll not just be a moralist. It will not be a kind of a discourse only of seriousness or advice. It's not going to be a conduct book which will prescribe what to do or not to do, but to temper. So it will enliven morality with wit. So there will be humor, there will be banter, but that wit will always be tempered with morality. So his priority is instruction, and he will mix instruction with pleasure. So that's the Horatian dictum, right? Utile and dulce, with utile or utility predominating over dulce or delight. So that my readers may, if possible, find both their account in the speculations of the day, and to that end that their virtue and discretion. So notice these words, virtue, and what is discretion? Discretion is making the correct judgment. So I'll help them make judgment in common life. So these are not religious moralizations. Rather, we can say that they are, as it were, social morality, social and cultural kind of discernment, social and cultural judgments that Addison will make them, help make his audience. So, till I have recovered them out of the desperate state of vice and folly into which the age is fallen. He's arguing that the age is fallen into a rut of folly and pleasure. So I will enliven their morality with wit and I will elevate them from a state of folly. So it's a very tall claim that Addison is trying to do. And notice the next line. He says, it was said of Socrates. Now remember, Socrates is the guru of Aristotle, as it were, therefore the wise man of Greece, that he brought philosophy down from heaven to inhabit among men. So Socrates, as it were, is the greatest philosopher of them all. And I shall be ambitious to have it said of me that I've brought philosophy out of closets and libraries, schools and colleges, to dwell in clubs and assemblies, at tea tables and in coffee houses. Now that is a fundamentally important line. He says, I have brought philosophy out of closets and libraries. So from the realm of only the learned, I have brought social philosophy, moral philosophy, to dwell in clubs and assemblies, at tea tables and in coffee houses. So he's suggesting that he's brought philosophy into these spaces which are part and parcel of the public sphere, clubs and assemblies, tea tables, and in coffee houses, right? So that's the claim, that's the manifesto of the Spectator, to bring philosophy, social morality, culture out from only the upper middle classes to a readership, and thereby create what is called a civil society which has a taste. So he's trying to manipulate public opinion, and he's trying to also manipulate public morality and public taste. So Addison's essays are very important in the sense that they are just not reporting like news what is happening. They're trying to condition the public sphere. They're trying to regulate public sphere, form public opinion, moderate public opinion, correct public opinion, as it were. So I would therefore, in a very particular manner, recommend these my speculations to all well-regulated families that set apart an hour in every morning for tea and bread and butter, and would earnestly advise them to order this paper to be punctually served up. And notice how now the Spectator becomes a kind of a commodity that is like breakfast, to be ordered, so that they can have this Spectator papers over breakfast. Sir Francis Bacon, of course, the author of the essays, observes that a well-written book is like Moses' serpent that immediately swallowed up and devoured all those Egyptians. The reference, of course, is to Exodus. I shall not be so vain to think that where the Spectator appears, the other public prints will vanish. So he says this, it's a kind of an invocation almost. He's announcing the greatness of the public Spectator papers. Once the Spectator arrives, everything else will fade. But shall leave it to my readers' consideration whether it's not much better to be let into the knowledge of oneself than to hear what passes in Muscovy or Poland. And he says that, therefore, I am not interested in exotic news, but in the everyday affairs of the common Englishman. Right? So the Spectator is also trying to generate a kind of a national public discourse, but it's not trying to be an international kind of a phenomenon. In the next place, I'd recommend my paper to the daily perusal of those gentlemen whom I cannot but consider as my good brothers and allies, fraternity of spectators who live in the world without having to do anything in it. Therefore, he's talking about the leisured class. Either by affluence of their fortunes or laziness of their dispositions, have no other business with the rest of mankind but to look after them. Under this class of men, so it's now saying what class of people are going to read the Spectator. So obviously the landed gentry will. Then all contemplative tradesmen. That's a very important category. Therefore, Sir Andrew Freeport is part of this readership, contemplative tradesmen, physicians. So now he comes to the people who serve, fellows of the Royal Society, right? So all scientists, physicians, Templars, lawyers that are not given to be contentious, statesmen that are out of business. In short, that is another important line which you can underline if you want. Everyone that considers the world as theatre and desires to form a right judgment of those who are the actors on it. So the Spectator is directed at everybody who is interested in the public sphere. See, when I talked about the public sphere, we talked about the public coming together as a body and thereby forming public opinion. So it's a mass. It's an unidentifiable mass of people where all of you are, you and me as individuals are part of it, but it is amorphous. I mean, you cannot say this is the public. The public is largely indistinguishable. It's the mass of people. And he's suggesting that the Spectator papers is going to be part of this mass of people. There's another set of men that I must likewise lay a claim to, whom I have lately called the blanks of society. I have considered these souls with an eye of great commiseration when I've heard them asking the first man whether there was any news stirring, and by that means gathering together materials for thinking. So he's now left the members of the upper class and the middle class, and he's talking about the common people who are in a desire for news. These needy persons do not know what to talk of. Till about 12 o'clock in the morning, just give me a second, please. Right. But for that, by that time, they're pretty good judges of the weather, know which way the wind sits, and whether the Dutch mail may come in. So these are people who are interested in the news, who are idle and who are interested in the news. As they lie at the mercy of the first man they meet, I would earnestly entreat them not to stir out of their chambers till they have read this paper. So he says, these are the people who consume news. So I invite them not to not to consume frivolous news, but to consume an useful dose of social morality. So category 1 of readers, the landed gentry. Category 2 of readers, the upper middle class and the service class, scientists, educated people. Category number 3, the common people who are desirous of news, but who very often read frivolous news. So he's going to provide to them a kind of useful dose of morality, which will deal with contemporary affairs, but which will also not be sensational. It will be useful. Once again, the key word here is utility. And do promise them that I'll daily instill them such sound and wholesome sentiments as shall have a good effect on their conversation for the ensuing 12 hours. So he's also setting the agenda for social conversation, right? So you see, if you looked at it, very often when you talk amongst yourselves, you talk about the things that the news channels provide you. Say now everybody is going to be talking about the elections in Bengal, or you might talk about some other issue. So who sets these issues? What is the subject of the morning's news and conversation is what the print public sphere does. And Addison is suggesting that he will generate a civil public print sphere and therefore set the agenda for the conversation for the day. So one is the landed gentry and the people who are leisured. Two, the common working people, as it were, the tradesmen, physicians, scientists, highly educated. who will benefit from the doses of morality. Also, the common public who are desirous of news and whose conversation the Spectator will sort of shape. Very importantly, this is the next audience where it comes to. There are none to whom this paper will be more useful than to the female world. As I pointed out in one of my lectures, female literacy was rising at a rate of about 400% in the next 50 years. And already it was on the uprise. So Addison is realizing that this is a very, very significant part of his readership. And he is also to offer something for their, use and entertainment. I've often thought that there have not been sufficient pains taken in finding out proper employment and diversions for the fair ones. The amusements seem contrived for them rather as they are women than as they are reasonable creatures. So now that's a very, very revolutionary statement in a certain sense. Addison is suggesting that he's also going to treat his women as reasonable creatures, not as sentimental consumers of fiction or sexuality, that they are going to be reasonable readers of his essays, and he's going to instill within them a taste, a sense of reason, and a way of conversation. The toilet is the greatest scene of business, the right adjusting of their hair, the principal employment of their lives. The sorting out of a suit of ribbons is reckoned a very good morning's work. And if they make an excursion to a mercer's or a toy shop, so great a fatigue makes them unfit for anything else. The most serious occupations are sewing and embroidery, the greatest drudgery, the preparation of jellies and sweetmeats. He says women are engaged only in frivolous activity throughout the day. So I'm going to give them a rational dose of news and opinion so that they too can be part of the public sphere. So for the first time, really, in print culture, a major author is acknowledging the presence of women as a mass of readership. And secondly, they're talking about their need, the need to provide women rationality and sort of draw them into the public sphere. So, I know there are multitudes of those of a more elevated life and conversation that will move into an exalted sphere of knowledge that join all the beauties of the mind to the ornaments of the dress. I hope to increase the number by publishing this daily paper, which I shall always endeavor to make an innocent, if not an improving entertainment, and by that means at least divert the minds of my female readers from their greater trifles. So he says, the Spectator papers is also going to be equally vital for women, and in providing them with rationality, subjects of conversation, drawing them into the public sphere, and relieving them from their trifles. At the same time, I would fain give some finishing touches, which are already the most beautiful pieces in human nature. I shall endeavor to point out all those perfections that are the blemishes as well as the virtues, which are the embellishments of the sex. So saying that I'm going to point out the follies of women, I'm also going to point out the beauties of women. So women are going to be both the subject of the essays as well as the readership for his essays. So the first time really that a major writer is acknowledging the woman as part of the public sphere, the need for women to come out only of their trifling activities, enter into the rational sphere, and be drawn into rational conversation. In the meanwhile, I hope these my gentle readers who have so much time on their hands will not grudge away throwing a quarter of an hour on this paper, since they may do so without any hindrance to business. He says these are small papers, small doses of morality, but they're very vital and they will not impinge upon the time of the people. I know several of my friends and well-wishers who are in great pain for me, lest I should not be able to keep up the spirit of a paper, which I oblige myself to furnish every day. Right, so he says, my sort of setting a kind of a sort of reminder for himself. He says, my friends say It might not be possible to keep up the paper every day, but to make them easy in this particular, I will promise them faithfully to give it over as soon as I grow dull. This is as soon as I cannot manage and repeat myself, I will give over. This, I know, will be a matter of great raillery to the small wits, will frequently put me in the mind of my promise, desire me to keep my word, with many other little pleasantries of the like nature. But let them remember that I do hereby enter my caveat against this piece of railing. So he says, it will be my best effort to provide entertainment and morality to the people. First, morality spiced up with entertainment. If I fail to do so, I will then give up writing the Spectator papers. Now, that's a short essay, but I'm devoting an entire class to it because I want you to ponder over what Addison has just suggested. Addison has given us, first and foremost, a line from Virgil, one of the most seminal rhymes from Virgil. And Addison is suggesting that a mind is a devil's workshop until and unless it is properly exercised. That is to say, if it is not sharpened regularly with judgment, then the mind becomes dull. So you need something to sharpen your mind. I think that the Spectator papers is going to sharpen the minds and sensibilities of the people. Point number one. Point number two, he is acknowledging that his paper is getting popular and that the paper has a purpose. Point number three, what is the purpose? The purpose is that the people are fallen into a state of sensation, pleasure, and idleness. Therefore, they need their minds to be diverted, polished, and elevated by morality. But this morality is not of a religious kind, neither is it preaching. So he cannot be sermonic. Rather, he wants to inculcate within society a kind of a social morality, a code of behavior, a civil society that will listen, exchange opinions, and will formulate a public sphere. And therefore, he will bring knowledge out from closets and libraries. He'll bring this social philosophy in small installments to the general people at large in the spaces of the private, of the public sphere. So he will provide philosophy, or he will liberate philosophy out of closets and libraries to dwell among clubs and coffee houses. Right, so learning, seriousness, entertainment, social morality, small doses to the people at large within the public sphere. And therefore, his suggestion is that he will enliven morality with wit and temper wit with morality. So the dulce, the teaching, the moral comes first, and it is only then that the delight will come. But he's going to mix around this humor, satire, conversational tones, characterization, light banter. But the end of the Spectator papers is not pleasure. It is to comment on social affairs, form public opinion, and condition public opinion. And then he says, my essay is the best of the lot. And who are my audiences? The leisured class, the employed class, the highly educated class, and also the common people who hanker after news. They too shall read the Spectator papers and find their subject of conversation. Finally, all women who can read will be part and parcel of the readership of the Spectator papers, and I will make them both the topic of the Spectator papers as well as the readership of the Spectator papers. It is going to comment on issues of society, it is going to comment issues of culture, it is going to comment on issues about women that he has articulated. So this is the manifesto for the Spectator papers, that these are small doses of morality administered with humor and taste and harmony every morning, and that reading a Spectator papers is a process through which society can be polished. Now, this is what will lead to the idea of a civil society. What is a civil society? Right, so we've just talked about the public sphere. Now, a civil society is where you do not enter into confrontation while you are exchanging views. So civil society is one which permits difference of opinion and permits dialogue amongst its different constituents. And it is also marked, civil society is also marked by the presence of various registers, various tones of voice, various voices, and the harmonious coexistence of differing opinions and classes. Right. So public opinion can be generated without bloody conflict. Now, Addison is setting a model in the Spectator papers that through the discussion amongst the various members of the Spectator papers, he is going to record a process through which this public opinion and civil society can be articulated on the pages of the Spectator. He's also suggesting that once he grows stale and boring, he will himself quit writing the Spectators. Right. So that's the purpose, that's the agenda. Right. One, appealing to all classes of readership. Two, that the Spectator papers are going to form public opinion. Three, the Spectator papers is going to combine public morality with entertainment. Four, the Spectator papers is going to draw upon the widest possible range of readers. And five, that the Spectator papers is going to be an agent through which civil society is going to be developed. That then is essay number 10, where Addison is setting out what the agenda of the Spectator papers is going to be like. Right. It is keeping these salient points in view. The Spectator's figure of strict neutrality and a sort of kind of a bird's eye view of society, but not news, mind you. His attempt is not just to report, but to condition and correct. Two, the creation of a set of characters who will provide a narrative delight, as well as in whose exchange and in whose civility the idea of civil society will appear. His readership is now defined, his purpose is now defined, and therefore Addison is claiming that he is democratizing philosophy, drawing it out, and he's going to be the great Socrates of the modern age who will offer this social morality and philosophy to the common people at large within the public sphere. This then is the agenda of the Spectator papers, and it is with keeping these in mind, this agenda in mind, that we shall take a look at the next few essays of the Spectator. In our next class, I will therefore bring this recording to an end here and take your questions now.